A son of justice chastised the bodies already martyred by the perverse sadism of his captors, the women snatched from the arms of their families and the heat their homes, to turn them into sex toys from their captors and merchandise to finance the cause. After being raped and tortured, now it was the turn of sex slaves' market. Chained are displayed in a public square, before lustful eyes, of men with grotesque gestures in their faces, as a hellish scene of past times, fortunately overcome for most of humanity. But that day, in that hot place, dusty corner of the planet, those women were subjected to the worst fate. Tears ran down the cheeks of a girl of 16, who at her young age has suffered the most horrible and cruel nightmare. She is snatched by her captors from the arms of other women, and taken to the center of the erected stage on the square, to begin the auction. Around the dais men armed with AK-47 rifles stand guard and stand between the stage and the crowd, and around it. Also you can see 3 off-road vehicles, with heavy machine guns mounted in their enclosures. Located in one corner of the square, a bearded, middle-aged man stands in front of the girl that will be auctioned, and with a sign asks a little quiet to start the auction. When starts the auction, a toothless man of dirty look, which could be the grandfather of the girl, makes the first offer, but the auction could not go much further because suddenly a relatively small object descends from heaven at full speed and crashes into the ground in a corner of the square. Before anyone could do anything, the object began emitting a terrible screech, an unbearable sound that pierced the eardrums of the ears of all those who were near. Everyone, the armed men, auction bidders, and sex slaves, had to cover his ears with his hands and lowered his head, tormented by the infernal noise. Even some of them fell to the ground on his knees, imploring loud noise to cease. Even issuing the infernal noise, the object began issuing a thick, foggy gas, while 2 other similar objects-shaped beacons also fell to the ground and also issued gas. Space was soon obscured by the sort of haze, which barely allowed a glimpse of the person next to you. The noise of first artifacts ceased, and was replaced by an eerie silence that lasted just a few moments. As soon reactor noise of an aircraft approaching at high speed was heard, and immediately the whistles of some artifacts that sliced through the air at an enormous speed. The next thing that they heard was explosions, caused by missiles that slammed into the crowd of shoppers and guards surrounding the stage. With the explosions were blown up the broken bodies of guards and buyers, torn limbs, legs and arms broken off, torn off heads. The dead were scattered, mutilated, blown, or riddled by shrapnel of the missiles, together with severely maimed and wounded torn apart, all in the midst of large pools of blood, while the moans and cries of the survivors were heard. Then emerged of sky, the dark aircraft at high speed on the square flying low. Some men, overcoming his shock, took up the heavy machine guns of the vehicles and began firing in the direction of the aircraft, but the aircraft responded with his cannon heavy ammunition, and powerful bursts blew to pieces SUVs, jumping the bodies of the occupants disintegrated into pieces. The aircraft stopped stationary on the scene of the slaughter, like a helicopter, and suddenly the cabin opened and emerged an impressive dark figure, whose only vision could cause incredible fear of his enemies. Figure unfurled a large cloak and dropped as planning on the scene of the bombing. As the ship it rose, piloted the distance, as if it were a drone, by another man who was far away. When the figure hit the ground, some of the surviving militiamen seized their rifles and started shooting, but the bullets bounced off his suit that looked more like an armored armor. The Dark Knight pulled a weapon, similar to a handgun, but slightly longer and voluminous, and fired bursts of machine gun to men, killing or wounding several of them. Then another of them went over him with knives and machetes, but the Dark Knight was involved in a melee with them. With incredible skill and strength, he was leaving out of combat them, giving strong punches, kicks, and martial arts keys, breaking or fracturing bones to right and left. At one point, he removed the machete to one, and seeing that another of them was going to shoot his rifle to some women who took the opportunity to escape, he raised the machete and let it fall, and the machete cut off one of the arms to Roughneck. Then he nailed the machete in the head to another and left it embedded, while the Roughneck collapsed dead. Meanwhile the aircraft took a turn in a circle around the square and swept with his cannon some of the militiamen. The Dark Knight spoke inside his hood.
Function translation.
said.
Please stay calm. We're here to help them, to save them.
He said, addressing women, and their words were translated into another language by the device coupled in his hood. At that time the Dark Knight heard a man's voice from headphones of his hood, who warned him.
They're coming, sir.
Shortly after they appeared for one of the streets leading to the square, several military vehicles with the colors and logos of the forces of the autonomous government of Iraqi Kurdistan. Of them emerged soldiers who shot to some of the few surviving militiamen the bombing, which chose to escape through the surrounding streets, and some threw down their weapons and surrendered, asking mercy, while the Kurdish soldiers gave them with rifle butts and gave them kicks in floor. Shortly after the soldiers had secured the area and soothed the women, that were crying embraced, still incredulous at what had happened. An officer approached the Dark Knight, with cautious expression on his face, as if he did not quite believe that was before such character. Thank you very much for your help. My men have secured the perimeter and we have established a route to safely evacuate to women, although in neighborhoods of East and the South there are strong terrorist presence, but the coalition has told us that soon they begin to bombard to cover our progress, said the official.
All right, I will give them air cover until you have evacuated to women. I count on you to bring them to the meeting with their families.
So be it, we will honor our word, replied the officer, offering his hand to Dark Knight, and he gave a handshake. The dark aircraft appeared at that time, stationary, hovering over them, making everyone present startled except the Dark Knight.
Until next, Colonel,
said the Dark Knight, as he raised his arm and fired a contraption from which hung a thin wire rope as a rope. The contraption hooked to a portion of the nose of the ship, and the cable tightened, and to go rolling into a small pulley on the belt of the Dark Knight. It was raising to take it to the aircraft, where he got into the cab and took the pilot controls. The aircraft lifted and then walked toward the east. Meanwhile, one of the soldiers finished recording the scene with his mobile phone, and a companion approached him and excited. The two men exchanged impressions of what happened. A few days later, thousands of kilometers away from there, in the lobby of a modern and luxurious hotel, in a big city, many people lived their life very different from those people trapped in that distant conflict. While some people lounged in the comfortable seats installed in the lobby, some others simply waiting and killing time, others walked more or less quickly, in a constant coming and going, and some hotel employees were busy in their work. A well-dressed man with sport coat and shirt without a tie, he viewed from his seat the TV screen placed on a wall near the ceiling height. They were broadcasting a news of a known television channel.
And returning up one of the most commented news of the week, it is growing the credibility of the information that Batman participated decisively in an operation in a small town north of Mosul, in Iraq, to free a group of women captive of the Islamic State, that were to be auctioned off as slaves. Sexual,
commented a beautiful and relatively young newscaster from Study.
Although the Kurdish autonomous government and the multinational coalition fighting the Islamic State have refused to confirm or deny officially the information, anonymous sources from both the Kurdish regional government and the Pentagon confirm the information. Military experts consulted by this channel give credibility to a video posted on YouTube by supposed Peshmerga of Iraqi Kurdistan, which shows the departure of Batman and his Batwing, after culminated the rescue operation. It would be one of the few acts of vigilante of Gotham outside the territory of the United States. According to an official, sources were rescued about 100 women, many of them teenagers, almost girls. In the news program of Primetime we'll expand this information. Also, we will see in our section Finance, the interview that our colleague and financial analyst John Dayton did to businessman Bruce Wayne, which they will discuss the recent participation of Wayne in Forum of Businessmen organized by the UAE in the city Dubai, and investment projects of Wayne Enterprises in the Middle East.
The man watched the news with expressionless face, and after a moment checked the time on his wristwatch. Then he stood up and walked to the elevator and went up. Upon reaching the 30th floor, he left and found in the hallway with a group of bodyguards. "I'm Peter Walker, Mr. Maddock wait me," man said. "Yes, Mr. Walker, with your permission," replied one of the bodyguards while passed around his body a metal detector. "Come in please," added at the end of the rapid inspection, and while another bodyguard opened the door to a suite. Meanwhile, in one of the lower floors, 2 men took off uniforms of hotel waiter, and let's see black camouflage uniforms, then they opened with their electronic cards a door, and left enter a group of 6 men with the same black camouflage and ski masks, carrying automatic rifles. The armed group entered an elevator and they pushed the button for the 30th floor. The elevator began to rise, with their weapons ready for action. But at the 29th floor the elevator suffered a strong tremor, who men threw down, while the lamplight of elevator was fading. "What's going on?" alarmed shouted one of the men. Then, the elevator began to fall at high speed, slumping vacuum, while inside him men shouted and banged against each other. When the elevator reached the lower floor, crashed on the floor with an infernal noise, like an explosion, a noise formed by many noise together, added and multiplied by 1,000, the elevator noise itself busting and disintegrates, its impact with the ground, the noise of the bones of every man in the team breaking at the same time, their members jumping through the air, and their viscera breaking out, the noise of 8 men dying busted. A maid of hotel, who was in the basement where there was the blast and elevator fell down, got up frightened and she saw through the ruined elevator doors the gruesome spectacle of mangled and blown bodies. Amid a bloodbath and viscera, she hid a cry of terror. While at the top of the tunnel to the lift, the Dark Knight watched the scene from a different perspective, after he having cut the elevator cable. Meanwhile, in the suite, Peter Walker, the elegant man, apologized to his listener and headed to the bathroom. Once inside, using a small laser emitting a ring on his hand to cut a panel from the wall, and when removed, he extracted from a hole an AK-47 rifle. At that time, in the roof, another group of mercenaries were preparing to rappel, to attack the suite through the windows, but suddenly an explosion disintegrated the gateway to the roof and the smoke arose. Batman. Some of the men tried to shoot the Dark Knight, but he wielded a rifle grenade launcher, and fired a grenade against them, which exploded in the air without causing a big explosion, but throwing a terribly corrosive acid that caused horrific burns in men, that fell to the ground between large howls of pain. Batman quickly fell on other group members and with quick punches and kicks he knocked out them, and grabbed one of them and after to stun knock, spun toward 2 of his companions and Batman shot them, with the rifle itself of the murderer. There were only 3 men already were about to rappel, but Batman threw a batibumerang to them, and knocked out 2 of them, that collapsed vacuum unchecked, then ran to throw himself on the 3rd, and as he hit the 2 fell into the void. Meanwhile, in the suite, alerted by the noise, 2 bodyguards drew their guns and approached Mr. Maddock to protect him, but Walker was leaving the bathroom with the rifle and shot, while Maddock was thrown to the ground. The door opened and other bodyguards tried to enter, but they were mowed down by Walker. But then the Dark Knight released the mercenary with who had jumped from the roof, and he broke the window of the suite. Entering it, Walker shot him, but the bullets bounced off his armored suit, and Batman threw himself on him and breaking an arm him with a wrench martial arts, made him drop the gun, then dragged the hitman to the hole in the window, and holding him by the shirt, vacuum suspended him.
"I want to give you a message from me to the Joker,"
Batman said in a threatening tone. What message?" the elegant man asked, his voice cracking with fear and pain from his broken arm.
"You're the message,"
Batman exclaimed, and immediately marked it with his red-hot brand with a blow on the forehead, making him cry out in pain, and then released it and let it fall from the 30th floor, to certain death.